Hi everyone, it's Dr. Wireman. Hope you guys are doing well and weathering this crisis. Sorry I didn't get to be with you this semester. That's been hard for me. I didn't have any time to connect with y'all, but hopefully I'll get to see you in a future class. So you are my first attempt at a video for all my classes. I'm going to talk just briefly about some of the clinical degrees and the differences between them. So for those of you who are interested in doing clinical work, that is working with people in either individual or group situations therapeutically. Oh, that's Hazy, by the way. My other dogs may wander into the film. Anyway, there are 7 different degrees you can get to do clinical work. And I just wanted to make sure you understood the distinctions and the different educational paths and the different types of things you can do with those degrees. So the first degree is a medical degree, an MD, and that allows you to get licensed as a psychiatrist. You basically go to 4 years of med school, and then you do a 3-year residency in psychiatry. And this day and age, psychiatrists primarily, they're part of the medical model, obviously, and they primarily dispense medications. A lot of psychiatrists are not able or trained as fully to do other therapeutic approaches. So very often they're meeting with clients to do med checks and regulate medications. The next 3 degrees are PhD degrees that you can get to do clinical work. And the first of them is a PhD in clinical psychology. And I'm a clinical psychologist. I worked for many years doing some consulting work as well as having a private practice. And with a clinical psych degree, you're allowed to do many different things. It's one of the reasons I love the degree. Obviously, I'm in academia. I'm a professor. You can consult, you can work in nonprofits, you can open a private practice, you can do all sorts of different types of clinical work. Like all PhD programs, and I know we've talked to you guys a lot about that this semester, a PhD in clinical psych is a research degree, so you have to have a very strong background in research and be prepared to do a lot of research during your training. The other thing I like warning students about is that a clinical psych degree is probably one of the most difficult of all degrees to get into these days, including med school, including law school. Here at Georgia State, we have anywhere from 400 to 500 applicants for maybe 10 to 15 spots. And these are really top applicants from around the country. So I hope and trust you've gotten the sense all semester long about the things you need to do to really prepare yourself for graduate school, and getting research background, getting involved in campus activities, doing things like UTAing or working on a Psych-I as a board member there. There's all sorts of different things you need to do that really enhance your application for this very, very competitive program. Another PhD degree is in counseling psych, and we had Dr. Colton Brown do a talk on that degree, and I thought he did a great job sort of making some distinctions between the two. Counseling psychology PhD programs are housed in education departments, not psychology departments, so there's sort of a different background and history of training that exists between those 2 degrees. As he mentioned, historically, one of the main differences has been that counseling psych focused on less severe pathology and clinical psych more severe pathology. That line can get blurry, but that is still kind of a basic difference that exists between the 2 degrees. Also competitive to get into, as he mentioned, not quite as competitive as clinical psych, but you need to be prepared to have some research background and do research while you're through that program, as well as your clinical work. The other PhD is in school psychology, which we had Sarah McCullough and her colleagues do a video on school psych for you. I added this degree because it's typically not thought of as a clinical degree, but school psychologists are called psychologists, and technically are licensed by the APA to do therapeutic work. As you heard, most of them don't. They tend to be doing more consulting and managing of various issues within the schools, and being kind of a conduit between parents and students and teachers and so forth. All right, the next degree you can get is called a PsyD, and that is it's a doctorate, but it's a clinical doctorate. It is not a research doctorate. So if you get a PsyD degree, you are called a doctor. You receive the same clinical training as a psychologist, but you do not have the expectations of the research background and research training. So for some people that sounds attractive if you're not interested in research. I guess I would caution you, the problems with that degree are twofold really. One is that because it's not, they're not housed in research university, they're housed as professional schools, like law schools or med schools. You don't receive any kind of stipend for attending those programs. If you go to PhD programs, you're generally fully supported by the department because you're accepted by a specific professor to work within their lab, and then you're supported by their grant funding. For a PsyD program, there's no grants, they're not doing research, so there's no funding. So typically, those degrees can cost over $100,000 to get through. They're as long as PhD programs, they're about 5 to 6 years of classes. Then you need to do a year of internship or residency, and then before you can get licensed, you need to do another postdoc year in order to get the requirements to get licensed. So it's a long haul for all those degrees. It's a big commitment, but in my opinion, it's been well worth it. It's been a career I've loved. I've had a lot of flexibility, a lot of options. Obviously, the ceiling is a little higher in terms of income, although I'd caution all of you, this isn't the field to go into if you're really driven by money, because none of them are particularly high paying. If you're very entrepreneurial and can work to set up your own businesses or consulting business, you can certainly make more money. On that note, by the way, IO psychologists, they're not clinical, but they tend to make the most money, and we've had 2 speakers during this section talk about IO psych because they're often charging business fees for the work that they do. So keep that in mind for those of you that would like to make a little more cash. All right, there's 2 more degrees I want to talk about that are clinical degrees. Again, and by that I mean they allow you to practice clinically, and those are a master's in social work, and there are other master's degrees typically called masters in mental health counseling. So both of those degrees, they tend to be 2.5 years of classes, and then you do a 6-month internship or residency, and then you apply for licensure. The licensure, by the way, is different for all of these disciplines. So if you have a doctorate in psychology or counseling psych, you apply for licensure through the APA, the American Psychological Association. For the social workers, they have their own accrediting agency within social work, and then the Masters in Mental Health Counseling get accredited through CACREP. I do want to mention, when you research these programs, you want to make sure that they are accredited, because it's very difficult to get licensed without that accreditation. And programs that aren't accredited will not tell you necessarily, but programs that are will always tell you that they're accredited. Another thing to mention while I'm thinking about it is in accredited programs, they often provide you with statistics on the number of students that apply, the number of students that are accepted, what average GRE scores are, what average GPA scores are, and so forth. If I was there with you, I'd pull up Georgia State's webpage so you guys can explore that and look under graduate programs, and they'll have a tab there for stats that tells you all of that information, which I think is good to know. It just sort of gives you a sense of whether or not you could be competitive for those programs. So I was talking about the Masters in Social Work and the Masters in Mental Health Counseling. The Masters in Social Work are housed in social work departments. The Masters in Mental Health Counseling are typically housed in education departments. And both of those degrees are not research-based degrees, they're master's programs, so you're really trained to be a practitioner and trained to do clinical work. Once you receive your license, you can practice independently. So those are the 7 degrees that allow you to do clinical work. They all have very different requirements. They're housed in different departments, and they have different sort of career trajectories. So it really depends on what it is you see yourself doing for you to determine which of those degrees you might want to pursue. I'm sure Dr. Good and Swartout have said to you before that I think it's best when you're thinking about a career to think first about what it is you ultimately see yourself doing. So when a student comes to me and says, Dr. Royman, I don't know what degree I should pursue, my first question is always, well, tell me, in an ideal world, what would you like to do for a living, professionally? What do you see yourself doing? And if your answer to me is, well, I'd like to do therapy, I'd like to do family therapy, let's say. My next question would be, okay, great. Do you have any interest in research or teaching? And if the answer to those are no, then I would probably encourage you to consider a master's program. If the answer to either of those is yes, I love research and I definitely would love to be a teacher at a university, then you're going to have to pursue a PhD for that. So always start kind of where you hope to see yourself, and then work your way backwards in terms of thinking about the types of degrees that you might want to apply to. For those of you considering applying to graduate school, the other thing I'd say is you don't have to apply to just one type of school. You can apply to different programs and see where you get in and see what ends up making the most sense. Some programs may offer you more money than other programs. The important thing is that you make sure at whatever program you're applying to that there are faculty there doing the things that you're interested in. So if you're interested in working with children, you need to make sure there are faculty that have a history of working with kids. So another thing I should mention, if it hasn't been told to you, for the PhD programs, it's really based on a mentor-mentee system. So when you apply to a PhD program, you're not just applying to the program at large or in general, you're applying to work specifically with a specific professor in their research lab. So, for example, if you have an interest in autism, hopefully as an undergrad, you've gotten some research background on autism, and you've built up a history of a year or two of doing research work that then leads you to apply to a PhD program with a professor that's their research interest is autism. And that professor accepts you into their lab. I know you had, I think Stephanie Bauman came and talked to you about the process of applying to graduate schools, and I think she talked a lot about that and the timing of when you contact faculty and find out if they have openings in their labs and if they're accepting students. But the PhD program is different in that way. The master's programs and of course med schools, the PsyD program, it's not based on a research mentor-mentee system, so you're applying to those programs in general. Well, I think that's it for now on that topic. If you guys have any questions, be sure and email me and I'll be happy to respond to you. And I'd encourage you to start just by searching out different programs and looking to see what curriculum they offer and what specialties they may have that would interest you as you think about pursuing grad school. So I think I may do one more video for you on a financial lecture, so I'll try to post that shortly, and look forward to seeing you guys. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're staying safe. I hope you all are healthy. I'm so sorry our semester was cut short, but look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye.